Something unprecedented happened on social media. Elon Musk, the man tasked with leading the Department of Government Efficiency, publicly agreed to audit the gold reserves at Fort Knox. The exchange was simple. Zero Hedge posted that it would be great if Musk could take a look inside Fort Knox just to make sure the 4,580 tons of U.S. gold is actually there, noting that the last time anyone looked was 50 years ago in 1974. Musk responded with a question. Surely it is reviewed at least every year. When told no, it is not, he replied with two words that sent shockwaves through the financial world. Let us do it. Senator Rand Paul chimed in with his support. His father, Ron Paul, had been calling for this audit for decades. The promise was made in public, in plain sight, with the full weight of a man who had just been handed the keys to examine every corner of government spending. That was 11 months ago. The audit never happened, and the silence tells you everything you need to know. Today we are going to examine what should have been the most straightforward transparency initiative in American history. We are going to look at the exposed and why the world's largest holder of gold reserves refuses to prove they exist. This is not speculation. This is documented history, public records, and the mathematics of accountability. By the end of this briefing, you will understand why the broken promise of a Fort Knox audit is not a failure of logistics. It is a feature of a system designed to avoid scrutiny at all costs. Let us start with the numbers, because the numbers do not lie. According to the United States Mint, Fort Knox currently holds 147.3 million troy ounces of gold. At current spot prices hovering around $3,300 per ounce, that stockpile carries a theoretical value of approximately $486 billion. This represents roughly 59% of the total gold reserves claimed by the United States Treasury. The remaining 41% is split between the Denver Mint, West Point, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Combined, the U.S. government claims to hold 8,133 metric tons of gold, making it by far the largest official gold holder on the planet, more than twice the holdings of Germany, which sits in second place. These are not small numbers. This is the foundation upon which the credibility of the U.S. dollar rests. And yet, when asked to simply verify that this foundation exists, the answer has been the same for over 70 years. Trust us. The last time anything resembling a comprehensive audit occurred at Fort Knox was in 1953, during the first months of the Eisenhower administration. I use the word resembling deliberately. According to the annual report of the Secretary of the Treasury from that year, the audit committee physically verified exactly 3 compartments at Fort Knox. Those 3 compartments contained 34.4 million fine troy ounces, roughly 1,070 metric tons. The remaining 322 million ounces, representing over 10,000 tons at the time, were not physically audited. The committee's reasoning, preserved in Treasury documents, stated that it is the opinion of this committee that the same agreement would be found should all of the compartments be verified. Read that again. They verified less than 6% of the gold and assumed the rest was fine. This is the audit that officials point to when they claim the gold has been verified. The famous 1974 event that most people reference was not an audit at all. It was a media tour. On September 23, 1974, approximately 150 reporters and politicians were given a 2-hour guided walkthrough of the facility. They were allowed to peer into one of 4 vaulted rooms. Television cameras captured politicians hoisting 400-ounce bars and smiling for photographs. The National Tatler published pictures. The public was satisfied, but no inventory was conducted. No serial numbers were checked. No assays were performed. No independent auditors verified anything. It was theater designed to quiet growing public suspicion after Washington attorney Peter Beater claimed that $20 billion in gold was missing. The show worked, questions subsided, and Fort Knox remained sealed. What happened next is where the story becomes truly interesting. Beginning in 1974 and continuing through 1982, the Office of Inspector General conducted what they called continuing audits of the gold at various mint facilities. By September 1982, they claimed that 100% of the gold stored at Fort Knox had been audited under this initial continuing audit program. The compartments were sealed, the job was supposedly done. But then something strange occurred. In 1983, the audit procedures were suddenly revised. Compartments that had been verified and sealed were reopened. Between 1983 and 1986, over 1,700 metric tons of gold at Fort Knox and Denver were subjected to re-audits. The official explanation was that new statistical sampling methods required fresh verification. But here's the problem. 7 audit reports from this period are missing, gone. The Office of Inspector General cannot produce them. Freedom of Information Act requests have been filed. The documents do not exist in any retrievable form. When you seal compartments, claim 100% verification, then immediately reopen those same compartments and lose the paperwork explaining why, you are not conducting an audit. You are conducting a cover-up. This brings us to the core question that DOGE was supposed to answer. Is the gold actually there? The logistical challenge of answering this question is not trivial, but it is also not impossible. J.M. Bullion, one of the largest precious metals dealers in the United States, published a detailed analysis of what a proper Fort Knox audit would require. Their estimate is 18 months minimum, with 20 personnel, 18 high-quality scales, 18 portable XRF scanners, 2 boring drills for assay sampling, and roughly 44,000 man-hours of work. The gold is stored in 13 sealed compartments, each approximately 6 feet wide, 12 feet deep, and 8 feet tall. The 400-ounce bars are stacked tightly, sometimes floor to ceiling, sometimes 4 to 5 rows deep. Moving 368,250 bars for proper inspection is a massive undertaking, but it is entirely achievable. NASA put men on the moon with slide rules and less computing power than your phone. We can count gold bars if we actually want to. The real obstacle is not logistics, it is access. Fort Knox operates under a strict no-visitor policy. The last non-authorized personnel to enter the vaults were Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin and Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin in August 2017. Mnuchin emerged and tweeted that he was glad the gold is safe, but he did not conduct an audit. He did not count bars. He did not verify serial numbers against inventory records. He took a tour, the same kind of tour given in 1974, and declared everything fine based on visual observation. When Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell was asked by Representative Alex Mooney about the central bank's foreign gold holdings stored at the New York Fed, he evaded the question entirely. When investigative journalist Ken Silva filed a FOIA request with the Fed for records reflecting how much gold the Federal Reserve Bank of New York currently holds, along with records showing ownership stakes of foreign central bank clients, the Fed denied the request outright. No explanation, no partial disclosure, complete stonewalling. This pattern of opacity becomes even more concerning when you examine what happened to Germany's gold. Between 2013 and 2017, the Bundesbank repatriated 674 metric tons of gold from vaults in New York and Paris. This was presented as a successful operation. Germany finally had its gold back on home soil, but there was a detail that received almost no mainstream attention. When the bars arrived in Frankfurt, many of them carried casting dates from 2013, not the 1960s when West Germany originally deposited gold acquired through trade surpluses with the United States. The bars Germany received were not the same bars Germany had deposited 50 years earlier. They had been recast. The official explanation is that recasting is standard practice for bringing bars up to current good delivery standards. Perhaps, but it also makes independent verification of original deposits impossible. If you deposit a bar with serial number A in 1965 and receive a bar with serial number B in 2015, you have no way of proving that bar A ever existed in the interim. You have a receipt and a promise. Sound familiar? The questions surrounding Fort Knox are not fringe conspiracy theories. They are fundamental accountability issues raised by government officials, Nobel Prize-winning economists, and financial professionals for decades. In 2011, Congressman Ron Paul pushed for the Gold Transparency Act, which would have mandated a full audit of U.S. gold reserves. The bill never passed. At the hearing, Inspector General Eric Thorson testified that 100% of the U.S. government's gold reserves in the custody of the Mint has been inventoried and audited, but when pressed on the details, the methodology revealed itself as circular. The Mint audits its own gold. The Treasury oversees the Mint. The Treasury reports to Congress that everything is fine. At no point does an independent third party verify physical existence against claimed inventory. James Rickards, an attorney and investment banker who has advised the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies on financial matters, has pointed out that an interesting revelation from a real audit would be how much U.S. gold is leased. Gold leasing is a way to inject more gold into the banking system than actually exists in physical form. Leased gold is counted on the books of both the lessor and the lessee. 1 bar, 2 owners. Rickards called this a can of worms that only a few experts understand and that the government has definitely not wanted to acknowledge. So where does this leave us in January 2026? DOGE made a promise. The promise was broken, no audit occurred, no explanation was given. The administration that campaigned on transparency and accountability looked directly at the American people, agreed that verifying the nation's gold reserves was a reasonable request, and then went completely silent. By July of 2025, even supporters were noting that the silence was starting to stink. 6 months passed, then 7, then 8. Now we are approaching a full year since that public commitment was made, and the vaults remain sealed. The questions remain unanswered. The 7 missing audit reports remain missing. The 368,250 bars remain uncounted by any independent party. Let me be clear about what this means for you. The gold in Fort Knox, if it exists in the quantities claimed, represents the last hard asset backing the credibility of the United States government. Every Treasury bond, every dollar bill, every promise of future payment rests on the assumption that somewhere, locked in granite and concrete behind a 22-ton door, sits a tangible store of value that cannot be printed into oblivion. This assumption has not been independently verified since your grandparents were young. The paper trail is incomplete. The audit procedures are internal and circular. The requests for transparency are denied. And when the most powerful efficiency czar in modern American history promised to simply look inside and count, he was either stopped or chose to stop himself. The protocol here is not complicated. You cannot audit Fort Knox, but you can audit your own assumptions. If the largest holder of gold reserves on Earth refuses to prove those reserves exist, what does that tell you about the confidence they have in their own claims? If Germany received recast bars instead of original deposits, what does that tell you about the integrity of custodial arrangements? If 7 audit reports vanished and compartments sealed as verified were immediately reopened and re-audited, what does that tell you about the reliability of official statements? The answers to these questions should inform how you think about counterparty risk. They should inform how you think about the difference between allocated and unallocated metal. They should inform how you think about the phrase full faith and credit. Central banks around the world are providing their answer. In 2020, approximately 50% of surveyed central banks kept their gold onshore. By 2024, that number had risen to 68%. India repatriated 100 tons from London. Poland brought home 100 tons and declared that gold symbolizes the strength of the country. Hungary went from holding 0 gold to 94 tons stored domestically. After Western nations froze Russian reserves, a World Gold Council survey found that a substantial share of central banks expressed concern about potential sanctions affecting their own holdings. One central bank official told Reuters anonymously that they had gold held in London, but transferred it back to keep it safe. When the institutions that understand this system best are quietly moving metal back within their own borders, they are telling you something without saying it out loud. I am often asked what the endgame looks like. The honest answer is that nobody knows. The gold may be there in full. It may be partially there. It may be encumbered with leases and swaps that make ownership claims murky. It may have been quietly depleted over decades to manage prices and maintain confidence. The point is that we do not know because we are not allowed to know. A system that demands trust while refusing verification is not asking for trust. It is demanding faith. And faith in financial matters has a tendency to evaporate at the worst possible moments. The broken promise of the Fort Knox audit is not just a political failure, it is a signal. When the opportunity arose to put speculation to rest forever, to prove the doubters wrong with irrefutable evidence, the choice was made to remain silent. That silence is its own kind of answer. You can interpret it however you wish. But do not pretend the question was never asked. Do not pretend the promise was never made. And do not pretend that the refusal to follow through is anything other than a deliberate decision to keep the American public in the dark about the most important monetary asset their government claims to own. The math does not lie, the documents do not lie, the missing reports do not lie, the recast bars do not lie, the evaded questions do not lie, the denied FOIA requests do not lie. The 70-year pattern of theatrical reassurance substituted for genuine accountability does not lie. The only thing that lies is the system that tells you everything is fine while refusing to show you the proof. 11 months ago, you were promised transparency. Today, you have silence. What you do with that information is up to you, but you cannot say you were not told. Class dismissed.